Chapter 21. Winter settled over Silver Springs like a shawl, soft, quiet, and persistent. The mornings were pale and cold, the windows fogged with breath and frost. Daisy woke each day to the sound of Pete moving about the cottage, preparing for his lessons at the seminary. He would kiss her temple before leaving, sometimes humming as he buttoned his coat, and return in the afternoons with ink-stained fingers and stories about his students. Occasionally, he led sermons, and Daisy sat proudly among the congregation, her hands folded over the swell of her belly. She watched him speak with conviction and grace, and each time he said "beloved," she felt it echo in her chest. Her body was full now, round and aching, with only 3 more months to go. She moved slowly, carefully, and Pete was always nearby to help. He propped pillows behind her back, warmed her slippers by the fire, and rubbed her shoulders when the weight of everything grew too much. Still, no letter came. Not from Petunia, not from her parents. While Daisy tried not to dwell on it, the silence was a shadow she couldn't quite shake. She visited the Howells often, where Aunt Eleanora still called her darling and ate her tea with orange peel and clove. They spent long afternoons preparing the baby's room, folding linens, arranging baskets, hanging soft curtains that fluttered in the draft. On Sundays, Daisy and Pete joined the Howells for a long-winded lunch. Uncle William and Pete would disappear into the study, their voices low and thoughtful over theological texts, while Daisy and Eleanora baked and gossiped in the kitchen, flour dusting their sleeves and laughter warming the walls. They had never dined with the Westons. Pete was firm on that. "Not until she makes her peace," he said, meaning his mother. Daisy didn't press. She understood. Some doors must be opened from the inside. At home, the evenings were quiet. Daisy, read by the fire, her feet propped up, her belly a gentle curve beneath her blanket. Pete would sit beside her, sometimes reading aloud, sometimes just watching her with a look that made her feel seen. She was growing closer to him, not just in habit, but in heart. There was something in the way he moved through the world, as if kindness were its natural language, and goodness its unspoken law. He carried a quiet faith that life was generous, that people were decent and kind, and he expected, without question, the same in return. She noticed it in small things, the way he left books scattered across chairs and tables, only to pick them up later without hurry, trusting they would still be there. The way he moved about their home with easy grace, as though the world was a safe place, where nothing was ever truly lost, only waiting to be found again. His laughter came freely, his words without guarded edges. He had a goodness about him, a simplicity that was not naive, but rooted in something deeper. A belief that life, for all its turns, was worth meeting with open hands. She recalled their walks into town, how he would greet strangers with the same warmth he gave to friends. At the bakery, he spoke to the baker as if they shared more than bread, asking after his children, laughing at a story he told. At the general store, he lingered to help an elderly man reach a jar from the top shelf, his tone gentle, his patience endless. Even the mailman, dusty from the road, received a word of thanks and a question about his day. Pete never rushed these exchanges. He treated them as necessary, as natural as breathing. Through Pete's quiet example, Daisy found her way back to faith, almost without realizing it. His manner was gentle, threaded through with a steady conviction that the Creator was loving and merciful. He never urged her forward or asked more of her than she could offer. Instead, he moved through his days with soft, unforced prayers, little moments of stillness that felt to Daisy like discovering a safe place to land. And in time, she stepped into that space beside him. It was nothing like the religion of her childhood home, where prayers were heavy with repentance and worship was steeped in shame. Watching Pete, she marveled. He embodied a way of believing she had never imagined, kind, patient, and warm. A way of faith that made her wonder if she had been wrong about her beliefs all along. Daisy felt something she hadn't in a long time: gratitude. For the men beside her, for the life they were building, and for the love that had come, not loudly, but like snow, soft and sure, covering everything. Snow that hides the harshness of the earth, smoothing jagged edges and broken lines. Snow that transforms the world, turning what is barren into something breathtaking, what is ordinary into something pure. It never arrives with thunder or fury. Instead, it comes softly, tenderly, drifting down until the harsh edges of the world are gentled and the familiar is remade into something quietly, unfailingly beautiful. That was how love had come to her, slow and certain, settling over the sharp places in her heart, softening what had once felt cold and unforgiving. And in that holy hush, Daisy understood grace at last. Not something to chase or beg for, but something that simply descended, quiet as snow. She had only to open her hands to receive what was freely offered, the tender, unassuming compassion of a good man. Chapter 22. The Howells' parlor was dressed in its finest. Garlands of pine and holly draped across the mantel, candles flickering in brass holders, and the scent of cinnamon and roasted chestnuts curling through the air. The dining table, stretched to its full length, was covered in a crisp white cloth embroidered with ivy. Crystal glasses caught the light, and the centerpiece, a bowl of oranges, cloves, and sprigs of rosemary, glowed like something sacred and timeless. Daisy sat beside Pete, her belly full and round beneath a deep green dress that Eleonora had helped tailor. She no longer avoided mirrors. She no longer shrank. She felt tall beside Pete, worthy of the space she occupied. Laughter filled the room. Uncle William, still Reverend Howells to Pete, despite Daisy's teasing, offered a blessing before the meal, his voice solemn but warm. Eleonora, now Aunt Ellie to both Daisy and Pete, passed the potatoes with a flourish and a wink. After lunch, the gifts were exchanged. Clara had sent a scarf, hand-knitted and uneven but sweet. Eleonora gave Daisy a silver thimble and Pete a new pair of leather gloves. Uncle William handed Pete a leather-bound notebook with a quiet nod. Then Pete turned to Daisy, eyes bright. "For you," he said, handing her a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Inside was a locket, gold, delicate, with a pressed sprig of lavender sealed beneath the glass. Daisy gasped, her fingers trembling. Inside, tucked behind the bloom, was a folded scrap of parchment. A line of scripture, handwritten in Pete's careful hand. "Daisy, you are fearfully and wonderfully made." "Pete," she looked at him, breathless. "Pete, thank you. I didn't expect." Her eyes filled up. Pete's eyes were dancing. "I wanted you to carry something beautiful, something that reminds you of who you are." Daisy blinked back tears, then handed him her own gift, a book, worn but well kept. The Shepherd's Way, a theological memoir Uncle William had recommended. Pete turned it over in his hands, grinning. "How did you know?" "I have my sources," Daisy said, glancing toward the study. Pete laughed, then leaned in, whispering, "You're very clever, Mrs. Weston." As the meal wound down, Daisy's thoughts turned to the afternoon visit with the Westons. The contrast was sharp. Where the Howells' home was warm and open, the Weston house still felt like a place of judgment. She shifted in her seat, clumsy now, but no longer ashamed. She was carrying life. She was cared for, and she was not alone. Pete helped her into the carriage, tucking a blanket around her legs and adjusting the cushion behind her back. The snow blanketed the town in white, softening every edge. As they rode through the town, they waved to passers-by, calling out greetings. "Last Christmas," Pete called, his voice cheerful and clear. Daisy watched him, marveling again at how easy it had been to adjust to life with him. He was always humming, always teasing, always looking at the world with curiosity and mirth, always finding goodwill. And though they still shared a bed platonically, She knew, Grace knew, that the time would come when they didn't. For now, she was content, wrapped in snow and warmth and the quiet certainty of love. That evening, Daisy sat curled on their couch, her feet tucked beneath a blanket, a mug of warm milk in her hands. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting soft shadows across the cottage walls. Next to her, Pete's legs stretched out, the knitted jersey from his mother already worn and loved. It was deep navy, with a subtle pattern across the chest, practical, warm, and unmistakably made with care, even if grudgingly given. "She knows I like this color," Pete said, tugging at the sleeve. "She pretends not to, but she listens." Daisy smiled, remembering the moment Mrs. Weston had handed her a small box, wrapped neatly, but with a stiffness that made the gesture feel more like obligation than affection. Inside had been a pair of baby booties, pale yellow, soft as clouds in the summer sky. Daisy had thanked her, and Mrs. Weston had nodded once, then looked away. Tea with the Westons had been quiet, formal. Clara had tried to fill the silences, and Mr. Weston had offered Daisy a seat by the fire. At one point, when Pete and Clara were distracted by a discussion about hymn selections, Mr. Weston leaned in, his voice low and kind. "You can call me father now, if you'd like," he said, "or whatever feels right." Daisy blinked, touched. "Thank you. That means a great deal." He nodded, then glanced at her belly. "How's the little one treating you?" "Restless," she said. "And heavy." He chuckled. "And Pete, is he treating you well? Or shall I have a word with him?" Daisy laughed, the sound light and genuine. "He's wonderful, truly." Mr. Weston smiled, eyes crinkling. "Good. He's got a heart like his mother's, stubborn and fierce. But the easy charm, that's all me." Daisy had smiled, understanding then the balance in Pete, the quiet determination, the gentle humor, the way he could hold both strength and softness without contradiction. Now, in the quiet of their cottage, she looked over at him. He was humming again, fingers tracing the rim of his mug, eyes distant but content. "I like today," she said softly. Pete turned to her. "Even my family?" She nodded. "Even then." It wasn't perfect, but it was something. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "We're building something, one day at a time." Daisy leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. The fire burned low, the snow whispered against the windows, and the world outside faded into hush. She was home. Chapter 23. February came with biting winds and snow that clung to the rooftops like icing. The world outside was brittle and white, but inside the cottage on Willow Lane, warmth bloomed in every corner. The fire crackled, the kettle sang, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and wool. Daisy was bigger now, her belly round and commanding, her movements slow and deliberate. She had taken to calling herself the Mountain of Willow Lane, a phrase that made Pete grin. "A mountain of love and bravery. All right," he'd said one evening, brushing her hair back as she settled into bed. "And I've always had a particular weakness for mountains." Daisy giggled, the sound soft and sleepy. "You're ridiculous," the soft glow on her face belying her words. "I'm devoted," he replied. That night, the lantern cast a golden glow across the room, making everything feel dreamlike. Daisy was propped up against a fortress of pillows, her bare toes peeking out from under the blankets. Pete knelt at the foot of the bed, gently tugging woolen socks over her feet. She could no longer reach them herself, not without a great deal of effort and groaning. "Hurry up and come to bed," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "I'm feeling lonely without you." Aye, Captain," Pete responded with a salute, making her giggle some more. These past few months, Daisy had grown used to falling asleep in Pete's arms. It had become her anchor, her comfort. On the occasional nights he stayed up late reading or writing. She found herself tossing and turning, unable to settle until he joined her. His arms, steady, warm, protective, had become her lullaby against the world outside. Pete climbed into bed beside her, pulling the blankets up and wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Daisy nestled into him, her head resting just beneath his collarbone, her hand finding his almost without thought. And as the wind howled, Daisy closed her eyes, wrapped in the quiet miracle of a love that had grown slowly, surely, and beyond anything she had ever imagined. As she felt herself drifting off, she whispered, "Pete." He mumbled, his eyes still glued to pages he was reading in the soft lantern light. She burrowed closer. The question came hesitantly. Why did you agree to marry me?" Pete paused, then set his book aside. His voice was thoughtful. "Reverend Howells told me about you, and I trust him." He shifted slightly, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. "He thought we could be a good match, seeing that you're a clergyman's daughter. I was ready to take a wife, but I wasn't in a hurry. I wanted to be sure. With the right one." Daisy opened her eyes, looking up at him, searching. "And you thought I was the right one?" Pete nodded gently. "I couldn't be certain at first, but after I met you, I knew." He paused, then added, "You said you weren't even sure who you were anymore. That stayed with me. And having met your father, I understood." He continued, his voice low and unguarded. "Then later, when you said you didn't want to be saved, I didn't know what to say. Most people want rescuing, even if they won't admit it. But you," he paused, searching for the words, "you were standing in the storm, chin lifted, daring it to knock you down. I thought that was brave, braver than anyone I'd ever met." He looked down at her, eyes soft. "Your strength, it humbled me. It made me want to be someone worthy of standing next to you." Daisy blinked, her heart full. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Pete leaned down and kissed her forehead, then pulled her closer to him. And in the quiet of that winter night, with snow blanketing the world and love blooming in the warmth between them, Daisy felt something settle deep within her. She was chosen, not out of duty, but out of knowing. Chapter 24. The cottage was filled with the scent of rosemary and baked apples. Daisy moved slowly, her belly leading the way as she removed a dish from the oven. The snow outside had softened into slush, but the cold still clung to the windows, frosting the edges like lace. She heard Pete's boots crunching on the path before the door swung open. His cheeks were flushed, his coat dusted with snow, but it wasn't just the cold that colored his face. It was something else, something bright and barely contained. Daisy turned, wiping her hands, then saw his face. "Pete, what is it?" He'd stepped forward, bent to kiss her cheek, then reached into the breast pocket of his coat. He withdrew a letter, careful and reverent, as though it was something sacred. "Your uncle brought it to the seminary today," he said, voice low. "It came with this morning's mail." Daisy's breath caught. The envelope was pale blue, the handwriting unmistakable, looped and elegant, with a slight slant. "Petunia," finally. Her heart skipped. She took it with trembling fingers, the paper soft and cool against her skin. Without a word, she turned and walked to their bedroom, the door clicking shut behind her. She sat on the edge of the bed, the lantern casting a golden pool of light across the quilt. Her fingers hovered over the seal. Fear and excitement warred in her chest. Petunia, after all these months, after silence and wondering and waiting. What would she say? Daisy closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. Then she broke the seal. "Dear Daisy, I'm sorry it took so long to respond, but I'm afraid your letter was never handed to me. Father, of course, but John found it, clever boy, and said I should have it. I don't think Father ever considered that one of his saints might care for their sinner sisters. Of course, John is growing into a man now. He celebrated his 13th birthday a few weeks ago, and all 3 of the boys have been asking after you, despite Father's pretense that you never existed. It's strange, isn't it? How silence can be so loud. Mother, on the other hand, cannot stop referring to your husband as the doctor, Reverend Weston, a man of standing in the big town of Silver Springs. She's practically making rounds to all the parlors where the worst gossip about you was spewed, correcting every tale with a proud tilt of her chin. I think she's secretly thrilled that you married a clergyman, just like Father. Father, of course, thinks he may not be strong-willed enough for you. When I heard that, I knew Pete must be a lovely man. How else? Please write again and tell me how you are getting on, with Pete, with the baby, with everything. Don't worry about me. Although Father hasn't said anything about his promise to Uncle William, he's stopped his talk of marrying me off, and I'm doing well. More than okay, I think, thanks to Tom Avery. A few days after you left, he came to church and slipped me a note, apologizing for his parents and brothers' reprehensible behavior. He stayed away not out of anger, but out of shame. He couldn't look us in the eye after what Philip did. He writes me notes now, all the time, but hasn't tried to charm me at the riverbank, thank goodness. Tom said that when I turn 16, on my next birthday, he will come and ask Father formally for permission to court me. I don't know what Father will say, but I know what I will. I miss you. I miss your laugh and your care, and your way of making even the worst days feel like they might bloom. Love to everybody, and let me know the moment my nephew or niece makes their arrival. With all my heart, the other flower about to bloom, your sister Petunia. Daisy sat on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in her hands, lantern light casting soft shadows across the page. Her eyes moved slowly over Petunia's words, each one blooming with warmth, wit, and the unmistakable resilience of her sister's spirit. Daisy laughed aloud at the riverbank remark, wiping her eyes. Petunia's spirit was unconquered. Thomas Avery's notes, his quiet apology, his promise to come when she turned 16. It was all so tender, so unexpected. Daisy felt a pang of hope for her sister, for the life she might yet claim. She folded the letter carefully, pressing it to her chest for a moment before slipping it into the drawer beside the bed. Then she rose, slow and full, and padded into the sitting room where Pete was stoking the fire. He looked up, saw her face, and opened his arms without a word. Daisy curled into him, the letter still echoing in her heart. "She's all right," she whispered. "Petunia, she's all right." Pete kissed her hair. "Of course she is. She's your sister, Daisy. Sometimes we forget that. Though flowers are wonderful to look at, they are resilient too." And in the tranquility of their little house, with snow whispering against the windows and the fire glowing steady, Daisy felt something settle inside her, something like peace.